Today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast, we are going to talk about a few different things. We're going to start off with talking about France, because it's hard to avoid talking about France. Usually we try and avoid talking about France as much as possible because it's France. Nobody wants to go there. But apparently it's a big deal. So we're going to break it down, tell you what happened, and kind of connections, similarities to what we've seen in North America over the past few years. Then we're going to break down some of these Supreme Court decisions that got dropped before the weekend, including affirmative action, a website designer given the right to free speech, and knocking down Joe Biden's $10,000 off your student loans. So that's a good thing. They're going to have a few other obscure stories about Pornhub, and then, of course, a drag camp for kids. But all of that and more on the Shrewd Dudes podcast. Alright, so before I get going, I'm going to just make sure that I'm joining the chat so that when Danny is ready, that he can hop on here and notify me when he is good to go. But until then, we can just kind of chat, hang out until Danny is settled inside his hotel room, which, as far as I've been told, is going to be only a few minutes. So if anybody has any conversation, any crazy things that happened over the weekend, this, of course, was Canada Day weekend, and today is, for our American friends, for our better nation, Independence Day. So, happy Independence Day, happy July 4th. Freedom from tyranny is always something to celebrate.
Daddy, I want to tell you something I wanted you to tell Danny. I wanted you to tell Danny that it was my birthday.
Well, Curtis, your birthday party was a few weekends ago.
I wanted you to tell him that it was my birthday party.
I'll let him know. So, yeah, my son's birthday party was over the weekend, so he might appreciate a few happy birthdays being sent his way. But I'm not going to force anyone to do anything. So, before Danny joins on, I have a couple interesting stories from the weekend. So, mostly related to D&D because D&D is always hilarious. At least in my sessions. My sessions are always super funny. So, I'll lead you in to our D&D story. So we have the party, and we're entering into a dark and dreary cave. Not a cave, a cabin. A cabin that is seemingly haunted. So the party investigates and finds this workshop. The workshop has been devastated by a significant explosion. So, something interesting. And it seems as though the focal point of the explosion is this tiny object. A gyroscope, if you will. And I was hoping they would touch it. They did not. They left the room and promptly got his owl, to touch it. The owl blew up. And they're like, oh, well, it's a good thing we didn't touch that. We would have died. I'm like, yeah, you would have died. That sucks. And so, like, oh, well, maybe we should finish this project this guy was working on. They're like, wait, we could finish the project. Or we could just take it with us and build a carrying case. And then we have a portable bomb. I'm like, what? Really? You have a bomb? Why do you want a bomb? And so they're like, yes, we have the metal case for the nuclear football. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Why are you building a bomb? It was just so ridiculous. They're like, well, it's to explode our enemies with holy light. And I'm like, really? This guy has worked his entire life to build this thing, and he's haunting the room as a ghost. And you're going to take his life's work because it explodes once in a while. Dang. I love you, so psychopaths. I just love you so much. But that was essentially my weekend. We also did sort of celebrate Ken today. At least we did something on Ken today. We took my kids out to the water park. And that was because there's a local splash park here in Canada. In Calgary, there's a few of them, actually. And considering the weather was about plus 30 Celsius, it was actually very, very pleasant to go to the splash park and spray my kids with water guns and throw foam at their faces. So, just tons of fun. But I'm just waiting for Danny to kind of show up. I'm assuming he's going to be here pretty soon. I just don't know exactly. So kind of just killing time. Just adding some tags to the Twitch. Because why not? Okay, well, Danny, I'm assuming will be along shortly. If any of you have any questions or any commentary about your weekend, or any stuff that you did, or maybe you'd like us to sing a song. If you have any requests for us to sing a song, then I'm down for it. It is a special day. We could potentially sing a certain tune for our American viewers. So, I'm hoping the daddy signs on pretty quick here. But, seeing as how he's taking his sweet-ass time, and I know that as soon as I start with this, he's going to sign on. So I'm going to start talking about France, and then I know as soon as I start talking about it, he's going to log on. So, let's just jump right into France, and then we can kind of take a brief interlude to talk about him. So, from Fox News, French riots. What to know as hundreds of police hurt, thousands protesters arrested after deadly shooting. So, protests have led to 270 policemen injured, over 2,000 protesters arrested. They've gripped the suburbs of Paris and have quickly spread to other towns and cities across France following the death of a 17-year-old during a traffic stop. But how did the situation spiral so far out of control? What's happening here is the consequence of a failure to integrate the country's Muslim immigrant population. Alan Mendoza, co-founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, told Fox News, "The France of legend is far removed from the daily realities of life in ghettoized communities that do not have the same opportunities to progress and succeed as the native population. France's forgotten communities are showing that they will stay forgotten no longer. The simmering rage felt in the banlieues." I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that. Just needed a spark to explode, and it's now being taken advantage of by an anarchical strain. A French society that has always welcomed disorder in the form of rioting and looting. In total, more than 2,000 arrests have been made in the 5-day period of unrest around the country. French President Emmanuel Macron, failure, has also postponed his scheduled visit to Germany as a result of the unrest. His Minister of the Interior said on Saturday the average age of those arrested was 17. Secretary General of Unite SGP Police FO said police haven't seen such urban violence in 18 years in so many cities around France. So, this is the situation, at least from what we know. They pulled over the teenager, identified only as Nahel M, in the suburb of Nanterre on Tuesday. He worked as a delivery driver, but he pulled over to speak with 2 police officers who approached his vehicle to explain that he had broken traffic rules. A prosecutor said the exact spark for the incident remains unclear, partially due to the contradiction of police reports and video that circulated on social media. Police said that Nahel drove his car at one of the officers, while the video shows one of the officers pointing a weapon at him and saying, "You're going to get a bullet in the head." Nahel drove a yellow Mercedes, had 2 passengers in the car and no license on him at the time, reportedly been placed in detention for refusing to comply with a previous traffic stop, and was scheduled to appear in juvenile court in September. The officer then appears to shoot Nahel as the car suddenly pulls away, traveling only a short distance, before crashing with Nahel dying on the scene. They took the offending officer into custody and opened an investigation into charges of voluntary manslaughter, with charges brought against him on Friday. Reuters reported in an interview with French television the police officer's lawyer said his client had aimed at the driver's leg, was bumped when the car took off, causing him to shoot towards his chest. Obviously, the officer didn't want to kill the driver, he said, according to the report. That's... So, what? He's pointing the gun into the car. I haven't seen the footage, and of course I can't show the footage on the show. Perhaps I can turn it into kind of commentary solo mode and I can watch it and see. I'll give my perspective. So, as Danny says, we'll go to where we watch videos, which is, of course, Twitter. And we'll see if there is... Oh, here it is. Oh, okay. So, I could see two cops. One is actually pointing his gun at the man inside the yellow Mercedes. And they're kind of holding him. And then he starts driving. Doesn't show from this angle, because this is kind of like an angle from the side. He clearly does not shoot until the vehicle starts moving. So, that is something to be said for this incident. It's really hard to tell in a lot of these incidents. But, Conquerworm, there was a guy dragging a guy behind a motorbike. Cars pushed out of the third story of a car lot to live onto Lev Street. Zoo animals released, building burned down, busty boo. Yeah, the stuff that's happening in France it's messed up. Like, yeah, we saw a tiny sliver of all of the stuff that happens in France on a regular basis when they have riots. When we saw the George Floyd riots and the BLM riots of 2020, like, yeah, that was bad. You had entire city blocks burned down to the ground. You had people driving up and others shooting them and their kids as they were pulling up to a stop. Things were horrifying. But France is just interesting. France will riot over almost anything. Like, I think there was a riot that they had a few years ago over a slight increase to the cost of gas. Like, that's just the way that France operates, and it's really, really crazy. I don't think I'll ever truly understand why the riots go and happen in such a way. Yeah, this is worse. This is worse. That's why I said we have... It's but a fraction. Or the BLM riots were what a fraction. Like this, we have 2,000 people arrested. We have hundreds of cops that have been injured in these protests. It's a mini miracle that we haven't had dozens of people die. Like, I know in the BLM riots we did have dozens of people die, but somehow it hasn't happened yet. I'm actually thinking back, it's sort of been interesting. I was reminded of the first season, if we kind of harken back a few years. If you've ever seen the Amazon Prime show, I believe it was a Tom Clancy show. It was called Jack Ryan. And it had, it's the Purge. It had Jim Halpert. I'm trying to remember the actor's name. Can't think of it. But it actually highlighted sort of this racial tension that they have in France in regards to... Yeah. I haven't seen the third season. I've seen the first and the second season. The first season I thought was really, really good. Second season, kind of hit or miss. Like, I thought it was really weird that they were like, oh, we're going into Venezuela. What's wrong with Venezuela? Oh, it's fascist. It's like, what? Like, you had such accurate political commentary with the first season. What happened this time? You just decided to say, screw it, let's just not? So I thought that was fairly interesting. Because I thought the political commentary of the the Muslims in France. Like there was an interesting remark between Jack Ryan and one of the terrorists. And it's like, no. Like, you're not in the United States or in North America. You are, like, I'm, like, right now, I'm a Christian Canadian. That would be, or Canadian Christian. Whereas in Europe and abroad, you wouldn't say that you are a French Muslim. You would just say you're a Muslim. Because there is a different identity in terms of relating Islam and all these kind of external religions and kind of continental Europe. So I don't know if that's for sure true, but it seems like it does have a decent ring of truth to go along with it. So that is probably egging on these riots. And of course, we have seen that these nations like France, like Greece, like Spain, these nations took on a lot of migrants in the past 8 or 9 years since the start of essentially what was the Syrian ISIS engagement. And there is significant tensions between kind of native French people and the Muslims which have emigrated. And the Muslim community, which has been there for several decades now. It's a dynamic that I don't know personally. I've only been to France once, and I didn't like it very much, especially Paris. I thought Paris was disgusting. Like, there are, of course, some beautiful sights to see in Paris, but they struggle with the same problems as San Francisco, where you have massive issues with cleanliness. So... oh, that's a sound I'm familiar with. That means that Danny has officially joined the Discord.
What up, bruh?
So I will get that set up with him.
Cool.
And we will get going on the show, and Danny can have some conversation and have his input on France. Because I haven't been... yes, on France.
What the heck's going on in France? Wait, I actually know what's going on in France. They're basically like rioting like crazy.
Yep, it's the Purge.
It's basically the summer of love, French style.
Well, except it's worse.
Yeah, pretty much actually.
Well,
the
like,
French really know.
Because we were already talking about
things.
it. They know how to do what?
They know how to overdo things.
Oh, they do.
It's like,
they definitely know how to overdo
it's
things.
Like you make a bread with, like, you know, like jam.
You make a bread.
The French make a croissant. They make a croissant with butter sauce or something like that. It's like they take everything and they just overdo it. It's like,
yes.
We're gonna go in the streets and get a little rowdy. Like, no, we're gonna burn down the entire city. It's like, whoa, hold on there.
Hold your horses.
That's right. Hold on there.
Yeah, you gotta meter things. You gotta keep them in check.
Video.
What?
Yeah, you don't have a video. What's wrong with your video?
Oh, I haven't turned video on. There you go.
Oh, there he is. What's up, man?
I just hadn't turned my video onto Discord.
I gotcha.
I also didn't share my screen because you haven't joined yet. But now you have, so now I have a reason to do so.
Now you have a reason to live.
Let's not go that far.
Okay,
let's not go that far.
It's not that crazy.
That is
all right. So
way too much.
Letting you know that my connection might be
a little spotty because you're using the Wi-Fi at the hotel. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I've been there. I know what it's like.
Okay, you know what.
Yeah,
I'm with.
I'm just checking out what's. Okay, let's. Conquerworm sent us a link for some of the video of the French riots, so let's watch that.
Okay, let's do it. Are we live right now?
Yeah, we've been live for quite a while.
Cool,
so,
sounds good.
Let's watch this video and see what's going on. It's only about 6 seconds long. Okay, that's clearly some of those are fireworks. I'm assuming some of them are actual explosions.
Used for that is yikes.
Yikes. Yep,
Yep.
that's yeah. Things are a little nuts over there. Just a little nuts.
A little spicy.
A little spicy.
Little. That's right. Now the funny thing is, I don't know if you've seen. There's been a lot of videos going around of people setting up crazy fireworks in
Oh
their
yeah,
homes
I
or
have.
something like that, blowing up like insanity.
Oh my
This
goodness.
is one I watched. There's a one I watched of this kid who set up a Pikachu, like not even kidding,
Oh,
a
no.
Pikachu, like firework, and it literally lit his room on fire. Like it was nuts. It was freaking nuts. It was awesome. I was like, dang, you kids are dumb. But it's funny to watch them kind of like panic. It's like, like he just freaks out. Like it's literally just just freaks out, and his mom comes in like, what have you done? Like the most prototypical black family freak out ever. It was awesome. I loved it.
Oh yeah, some of this stuff. Look behind the bike. Okay.
What? Look behind the bike. What are we looking at?
Oh, is he dragging somebody?
What?
And the guy just jumps
person?
over it. That looks like a person.
Oh yeah, that's a person. That
What? Wait, hold on. I don't think that's a person. It's emitting smoke. It has like a basic shape of a person. Okay, it could be a person. Like the fact that it's actually a question is really scary. It's like, oh yeah, it could be a person that's, being dragged behind this bicycle. And we lost Danny's connection with TrueConf, and he is kind of phasing in and out of Discord, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully he maintains and regains his connection, but I also know that connections at...
Yeah, I'm hoping so. It just literally went from normal to not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes... I know that, like, the previous hotels that I've been in, when I connect to the Wi-Fi, and I'll do, like, a speed test on my phone, it'll have, like, maybe, like, 4 to 7 megabits per second, which is basically non-existent connection. It's sad.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it's really sad. Let me check it right now while you're doing this. I'm gonna see what our connection's at.
Yep. Okay. Smoke from the shoes. Okay. So it could definitely have been a person or not. I can't say 100% either way, but that's just super crazy.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can find some more footage. I just searched up Nahel because that's the name of the guy. Oh yeah, this is for racial justice. And they're just like beating up a white kid on the street. My goodness. I don't know what that video is about. Here's some more video. Dang, that's very loud. Oh yeah, just setting a car on fire very casually. Yeah. Yeah. This is what happens when you have a whole bunch of people with a lot of energy and nowhere to put it. And you tell them that there is a boogeyman. Like I watched the video. The video is like the cop should probably receive some charges. Like, yes, the guy did drive off while he was being like placed under arrest. But from the angle that I saw, it doesn't seem as though the cops their life was not in danger because the guy was driving forward, not towards the cops. So, and it is possible that the guy was like pointing the gun at the leg, and then when the guy started driving, then he kind of like had a bit of a scared moment and shot him by accident. That is totally within plausibility, considering the footage that we have. So, it's all crazy.
It's still crazy insane, man.
Yeah. Anyways. So, we'll try and give more information, hopefully on Thursday, if we have some, about like future progress from France. So we'll kind of keep people informed if there's any new developments, or if the situation is still crazy.
Yeah, did you watch the little summary that what's his name? Paul Joseph Watson did like a short little
No, I
kind of
didn't.
thing. Essentially, his take was that France is basically that the riots are not necessarily like like anti-government riots, or like that they may actually be riots primarily driven by a lot of migrant violence. Like, in other words,
That's
the
kind of what I
participants may
kind of intonated that it would be.
yeah, that they're primarily like like being done by migrants, not by like French people. Like like in the past, remember the Yellow Vest right, or protests? Those were done by primarily French people,
Yes.
people who are actually native French people and all that. These are primarily a lot of like young hoodlums.
Yes.
That are basically running around, going nuts, doing their thing and all that. So it sounds like France and a lot of European countries are basically dealing with a ticking time bomb, which is the migrant issue, and people are pissed at the migrant chaos that their local governments have created, and so I think they're a couple of years ahead of what the U.S. will become.
Yep. Well, it was sort of interesting. There was a guy who posted, because when I scroll through Twitter, I see a whole bunch of people, and a lot of people who I kind of scroll through that show up on my feed are left wingers. And so this one guy was like debunking right wing misinformation and conspiracy theories, and it's like the majority of violence in Europe is not happening from migrants. Migrants are only 2% of the population, but they represent close to 10% of violent crime. And I'm like, this doesn't tell the story you wanted to tell. So that means they're committing 5 times the violence that they should be committing if it was proportional.
Oh yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, it's still too much. But it's not as much as they say it is. And it's like, well, like this is why we say, when we're talking about like the States, we're talking about Canada, it's like, this is why that we say that there's a problem. Because in a lot of these places, including the States and in Canada, there are certain groups in society which are small groups of society, but they commit a disproportionate amount of crime. In the United States.
Yeah, I remember Charlie Kirk was having a debate, and those really funny, not funny, viral videos where people are like throwing curveballs, and conservatives have really good talking points. One of the big things that I hear a lot, people say they try to dismiss the crime stats by saying oh, there's more crime because the police are watching closer in these neighborhoods, and it's like, well, that doesn't make okay. You assume that wherever the police are in large numbers, then people are going to be arrested in large numbers, and that's just not true. Like, there's big police presence. For example, when I was in Vancouver, they had West Point Grey, which is right next to the UBC campus. It's a rich neighborhood, primarily white like, upper class kind of like neighborhood. The police were there in large numbers for a different reason, but they were not arresting people in large numbers because there isn't a large number of crime there. So the whole notion that every kind of disparity that we see is entirely because of racism, right? It's like, no, it's because you're unwilling to actually like do the hard work of looking at what may be the actual cause. It's like, oh, we've decided before we even started what the cause is.
Yeah.
It's racism.
Hang on.
Racism.
This is I haven't seen this video, but this is crazy.
Lab react.
Oh my gosh.
What was that? Is that cars?
That's cars being pushed out of multi-story car garages.
Are we watching Fast and...
Like into traffic.
Wow.
Hokey Dinah.
And people screaming.
Yeah, like.
Okay. I will say, did you ever watch Fast and Furious 6? I think it was.
Oh, the one where they like auto control the cars and like
they launch them out.
They launch them out like that. Yeah, that sort of looks like that.
That looks like that. That's that's the future of the crazy. Nuts. Jeez.
This is insane.
Like you said, this like jokingly at the beginning that this is like the Purge, and then the more we see, the more we see.
This is like, whoa, this is the Purge.
That's more of an exaggeration for kind of like for effect, kind of thing, like what do you call it? Hyperbole.
Yeah,
hyperbole for effect. But the more you see the actual videos, the more you're like, oh no,
this is
like
not hyperbole. This is real.
Purge. This is the Purge.
Wow.
That's the kind of thing where people like legitimately should never go outside.
No.
In that kind.
And this isn't like, of course, when you're like, we did a bit of a compare and a contrast between the Summer of Love in 2020 and this. Yeah. Majority of incidents in 2020 with the BLM protests, they all happened at night. So it'd be like people could go about their day-to-day lives, and then in the evening, you just wouldn't go out.
No, but also they were also concentrated to specific areas of the city. So Kyle Rittenhouse, like he was told what parts of the city to avoid and what parts are kind of safe to kind of patrol around. So he knew where to go. Yeah, people knew where to go and to avoid. And this is the kind of stuff that's literally going everywhere.
Oh yeah,
dang. Like it's insane. It's like World War Z, like the zombie apocalypse.
Well, this video that I think this is gonna be the final one that I'm gonna highlight from you, Conquerworm. France became a GTA lobby.
Who is that coming off the goddamn pick and run? Oh, brother, who's that?
It's like
flabbergasted.
It's like the Purge.
I'm sorry, I didn't even show anybody. That was all in commentary. I forgot to turn that on.
Oh, gee. Nice job. Do it again.
All you
hear is like,
yeah.
Do it again. Okay, so maybe kind of narrate a little bit as you go through it.
Okay, well, it's only 18 seconds, so here.
Yeah.
We're going to start at the beginning.
Go for
it. And now it refuses to load. There it is. So, helicopter taking off in the middle of the street.
Full screen.
Bus driving through a fire. Lions on the road.
On fire.
Ostriches and zebras running on the road. Batman showed up. People piling out of a moving vehicle. And then just people topping on police cars. Like, this is just nuts. And then, of course,
it's something
this line that Conquerworm sent us. So, Conquerworm, you've really been on top of this, so we appreciate it. 492 buildings torched, 2,000 vehicles burned, 3,880 fires nationwide, thousands of shops looted.
Yikes.
This is crazy.
This is like okay. So historically, I remember like studying a couple of the popular people's rebellions, right? Like there was a popular people's rebellion in Rome, There's one in obviously Germany. Like Martin Luther was present when the People's Revolts happened in Germany. There's several in England, different time periods. Oh yeah. There's a whole bunch of different areas. Whenever People's Revolts happened, these were completely like unhinged. People went completely nuts and destroyed everything, rioted, looted, like criminality was went. This is actually like a people's revolt. Like for whatever rationale it was, it's like law and order goes out the window, and people's worst, like the most unimaginable behaviors that you normally don't see in a regular society happen. Like I saw several ones where people were like going into like car dealerships, driving off with like multiple vehicles. Like people were like lighting cars on fire. Like it's the kind of stuff where you're just like, man. So yeah, sucks to be a person in France right now. My goodness.
Yes.
France is a dystopian nightmare right now. My goodness.
That is a bit of an understatement. So that's basically how things look right now in France. We'll keep you updated as to any progression, any updates to the story. But now we're going to talk about some updates from the Supreme Court over the weekend.
That's good. That's good stuff.
That is good stuff. Unfortunately, we can't see that stuff here in Canada because the Supreme Court of Canada is rubber stamp for garbage.
The Supreme Court in Canada is backwards from the American one.
It is.
Because they have a conservative majority. We have a liberal majority. Yeah. So we basically, we're not going to get fair stuff here.
Conquerworm, this is increasing worldwide, preparing way for man to have a solution to all the chaos. That's true. The solution, Conquerworm, is not Apophis. I'm just saying that right now. The solution is not Apophis.
It is true. You know what it's like, Stephen? What we're seeing right now with all these things, we're basically watching the plot of Captain America. Watching the plot. What was that?
No, I accidentally unmuted the Twitch.
Oh, okay. The plot of Captain America: Winter Soldier. That was Hydra's plan.
Yep.
It's like, well, humanity cannot accept, takeover unless there's chaotic enough.
Yeah.
That was basically the whole plan. Make the world so unlivable,
so chaotic and so unpredictable that people will be begging for the safety of authoritarianism.
Or it's basically also the plot of like V for Vendetta.
Yep.
Essentially. That was also the plot there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of plots. And
we're in a dystopian.
Yes, we are in a dystopian future. It is unfortunate. But now we will talk about the Supreme Court of the United States, which is not dystopian. It's actually pretty good. So, the first decision that was handed down from the Supreme Court is the striking down of affirmative action, which we'll talk about in a second. But despite the Supreme Court striking down affirmative action, Harvard said it may still consider race during the admissions process, citing the Supreme Court's own ruling against affirmative action. So the statement came after the Supreme Court ruled against affirmative action in higher education. The court said race could still be considered in some cases. So in a 6-3 decision on Thursday, the Supreme Court's conservative majority ruled the long-standing practice of affirmative action was unconstitutional. It is. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that schools had concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. Harvard, a private university in Massachusetts, said it intends to follow the court's ruling, but it noted that the decision still allows to consider race among other factors. As Roberts wrote, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. In its statement, Harvard uttered that a diverse student body would provide superior learning environment because the teaching, learning, research, and creativity that bring progress and change require debate and disagreement. Diversity and difference are essential to academic excellence, said the statement, attributed to school leadership. They say that they're basically intonating and they're basically highlighting and trying to push for the idea that diversity of race is all that matters. Whereas if you are actually valuing higher education and learning, then you're not looking for diversity of race. You're looking for diversity of ideas, diversity of opinions, where you're all coming forth and you're all bringing different experiences to the table. Yes, like, you'll have a different experience coming from different racial backgrounds, especially from different cultures. But saying that race is one of the most predominant and one of the most important factors in discussion and diversity is completely nonsense in today's day and age.
Yeah, no, it totally is. Interesting thing. I saw this, like, I always laugh at. There's like a Daily Wire story about how Mark Ruffalo, which is like one of the dumbest leftists in Hollywood, one of the most leftists. And basically, like, the story was cool because what it did is it kind of highlighted some of the major decisions in the last year that the Supreme Court has been doing in America, and it's been amazing. Like, the Dobbs decision obviously is monumental; it's one of the biggest ones ever. But recently, you have like the affirmative action, like decision. You have the decision that killed the Biden student loan forgiveness program, and then you have the one about the website decision. Yep. Those are all amazing because they follow constitutional law. And I think the one that was crazy was that Judge Neil Gorsuch. Gorsuch. He was basically like going through the dissenting opinion in that decision, the one about the religious freedom kind of one, and he was saying like their logic was so flawed. It was almost like it was almost insanely like bad. Yeah, like that's he was so like disgusted with their poor.
Well, it's so interesting because if you actually look up, like, I'll highlight it right now. This is how the Supreme Court religious freedom. If you look up the news for this, so much of this is, Reuters, LGBTQ rights yields religious interests.
Yeah.
Most of the ones that I wrote were like, Supreme Court deals like what this? Like Christian Science Monitor.
That's not a right-wing source, in case anybody's wondering. That's not.
Yeah. Like,
it's not the word Christian.
So much of these stories are.
That's the Journal. That's the first conservative news source right there.
Yeah.
Then you have Fox.
But there were other ones that I was reading over the weekend, and every single one of those sources, every single one of those stories was talking about how it was like Supreme Court makes it legal to discriminate. And I'm like, that's not what it did. Yeah. And I was involved in a Twitter spat about this over the weekend. And I had endless people trying to say to me about how the Supreme Court had legalized bigotry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't understand what it is.
And people wonder why we're like, like the media's biased. Like, what are you talking about? The media's not. I'm like, of course they are. It's not hard.
Oh, it's super easy.
I dare it. Like, I don't think it's possible to search a news story and not get the vast majority of the sources that come up in a Google search to be left wing, like almost immediately.
Oh yeah.
Like, and you wonder people can't do proper research because like it's skewed. It's totally skewed. You can't find a news story without like almost the entire first page being like left wing sources. Yeah, they totally stacked the deck in the favor of left wing sources. Like
here. Yeah. So I was responding to this person named Wes Davis. And he posted saying, in the United States, you cannot discriminate based on religion. But in the United States, your religion can be the reason you discriminate. And I tweeted in response, choosing not to perform a specific service is not discrimination.
Yeah.
And oh boy, did that send some people into a tizzy.
Oh, yeah. You started up a little firestorm, didn't you?
And they're like, well, like, if you're refusing to provide a specific service based on who they are, then that's discrimination. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm not I'm like, this person is not refusing to serve them. This is very similar to the Jack Phillips situation.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I'll go into it. I'll link up. We'll talk about this story now because we've been talking about it for a little bit. So from Reuters. So in a 6-3 decision on 303 Creative LLC versus Alenis, the court's conservatives ruled that the Colorado website designer Lori Smith has a First Amendment right to refuse to design wedding websites for same-sex couples, despite the state's law barring discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, amongst other factors. The court agrees with Smith and her lawyers of the Alliance Defending Freedom that the state cannot compel Smith to express a view she opposes via a website she has created, which is true. Compelled speech is not just a violation of freedom of speech. Compelled speech that's what you do that's egregious because it's just like walking into authoritarian territory.
It's not even saying you can't say this. It's saying you have to intentionally say something that you don't know is true, that you know is not true.
Well, like this is the decision. I'm hoping here. So this is from Gorsuch. Were the rule otherwise, the better the artist, the finer the writer, the more unique his talent, the more easily his voice could be conscripted to disseminate the government's preferred messages. That would not respect the First Amendment more nearly. It would spell its demise.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, Gorsuch actually did a really good job of writing, like the majority opinion. Sotomayor is just like crazy. So it's just like, it's the court is holding a license to discriminate. Business has repeatedly attempted to use the First Amendment to undermine civil rights laws, barring discrimination and providing services to the public. Until Friday's ruling, Sotomayor wrote the Supreme Court was unwavering in its rejection of those claims. What? No. Like, what was the Jack Phillips ruling? Even with a liberal court, they still sided with Jack Phillips against the state of Colorado.
It's true.
And it's interesting, like this, because I had to do a lot of research for this case, because a lot of leftists were trying to spout things. And apparently, like this whole complaint and the reason this went to the Supreme Court was based on a false request. Like the person that purportedly filed the request did not, like, was already married at the time and was married not to, like, the guy that made the request has already had, like, a family and kids. And he's like, I don't have a record of this. So I'm like, well, the timing for this request aligns fairly similarly with the protests and the riots against Jack Phillips. And they put a lot of requests and they put a lot of stuff forward so that they could try and put Jack Phillips out of business by suing him into oblivion.
It was an intentional hit job. That's
so
yeah,
this screams intentional hit job. And they basically just found someone who was their patsy, and then now that it's been struck down, they're like, oh, like she made up the whole thing. It's like, well, no, the lawyers have said that the request was legitimate, and then it came from an outside source.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's it. It was probably just someone trolling, someone trying to spur her on to try and ruin her business. And then it became a Supreme Court case, and thankfully the Supreme Court sided on the side of liberty.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is basically doing what it's meant to do, what it's designed to do, which is to basically quell all efforts to basically, curtail people's rights. And it's doing a good job. Two things about this story, though. First, the reason why compelled speech is more egregious than basically banning some kind of free speech is because when you say you can't say something, what you're doing is you're saying you're controlling people's behavior in a negative way. But when you're saying you must say this, now you're controlling thoughts. You're saying not only you can have your bad thoughts, but you have to keep them to yourself. Now it's like no. You have to think the right things, and it's a crime to even think things that are like like that disagree with the state. That's when you get into extremely dangerous territory, and you have to watch out for that. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the way that the left always responds to this, like you were pointing out, they respond, and news organizations are the best example, but we see this in real life.
Yeah.
What people do, and this is a tendency of leftists, and I saw it in two different examples I watched this week. Tim Pool had like I think it was over a week ago had that leftist from the Majority Report, and then you had another left wing lady, and they both do the same thing. It's the framing. How they frame something shows you how intellectually dishonest they are. Like, for example, when they say like like you want to show like I can't believe you want to show this to kids. It's like, well, what's wrong with that? It's pornography. No, it's not. I'm sure.
I think we lost.
They're trying to use this to groom.
Oh, I lost your sound for a second there, but you're back.
Oh, okay, good. I'm on my phone LTE. That's the only way I can actually make a decent connection.
I get it.
Okay. So basically, what they do, they ask questions, but it's so obvious that their questions are dishonest.
Yeah.
Like they ask, like, what does your show appeal to neo-Nazis? It's obvious that question, totally loaded question. It has the built-in assumption that is true.
Yeah.
And you're asking the person, like, why is this true?
Yeah.
And she actually all innocent, like, oh, I'm sorry, I triggered you. It's like, well, no, you're obviously not acting in good faith. This is how they operate. So obviously, a very good, intellectually honest case can be made that, yeah, okay, here's two options, two positions on the same issue. Okay, do you have the right to force someone to spread a message that they disagree with, or do you not? Okay, an intellectually honest person would be like, okay, that seems like maybe a stretch, or I disagree with that option. But leftists will just say, well, you're just picking and choosing the right, and like the religious extremism, the crazy dangerous right. It's like, okay, you're not being honest.
Yeah, no, it's
booga booga booga.
Booga booga. Yeah, no, like, and that's basically all the interactions that I had over the weekend was just a whole bunch of people saying it's like, well, they shouldn't have the right to refuse. It's like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean they shouldn't have the? Well, if they're discriminating, then they shouldn't have the right to refuse. And it's like, well, but they're not discriminating against the person. They're just saying, no, I won't do that service.
I like the way that Jojo Ruba, our buddy, he frames it. What's specifically wrong about discrimination? If you define discrimination as making a judgment call on something, then it's like, what's wrong with that? Like, okay, you don't allow people with security clearance that they have something like people who have a record of hurting kids, like sex offender. They're not allowed to teach kids in elementary schools. That's discrimination. People who apply to be a pilot, like, well, you don't accept blind people. Well, you're discriminating, yes, because you're making a judgment call saying, like, we want people who can see to fly a plane. Might be an important kind of detail. They just make it a wide, absolute claim that any kind of rejection of something that you don't like is automatically bad, an absolute claim. And I don't think that that's true. I think some forms of discrimination are wrong, not because discrimination as itself is wrong, but because it's the basis on which you make your discrimination. If you say, I refuse to hire black people, okay, why do you refuse to hire black people? It's because, like, all black people are lazy or whatever. Like, like you can make that kind of crazy claim. That's not a reasonable reason to reject people to far higher. However, if you say, like, I choose to hire like let's say a specific race of people, like, for example, if you have a Japanese sushi restaurant and you want to hire people who both speak the language and people who are culturally Japanese, like, because you want to create an atmosphere for a very specific kind of Japanese restaurant, well, then you should be hiring people who are Japanese, or at least who can speak the language very well and know the culture very well, like in some sense. discrimination itself is not bad. It's the reason why you discriminate. That is what makes discrimination bad.
100%.
Yeah.
So
we're so boring. We always agree.
it's happens
You should
a
have seen
lot.
me and my. You should have seen me and my mom in the car right here. Oh boy,
Yeah?
was that fun. Disagreement turns into like it's like talking to my like having a discussion with my mom very quickly de-escalates or like
Escalates.
falls escalates into a leftist the exact same way. They it just escalates into like accusations about everything, like oh, you're close-minded, oh, you're blockheaded, you're hard-headed. And I'm like okay, feel whatever you want. You're not actually demonstrating why. Like, knock
You're
yourself
not
out.
proving your point.
No, I'm like, you're not defending your point. You're just attacking me and saying like, well, you're just
You're just a
you're
bigot.
just like this, you're just a bigot. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, think whatever you want. I
Okay.
think you're wrong. Yeah.
Yep.
So I
Don't
don't know. You and
care.
I we're on the same boat here.
Yes, that's true. All right, so we're going
All right,
to
buddy,
quickly
thanks.
talk about the last one about the student loan forgiveness. So Supreme Court tosses Biden's student loan forgiveness plan where it belongs, the trash. Biden has every right to draw attention to the high cost of college. Yes, he does. And propose policy solutions. He had zero right to wave his presidential pen and declare billions of debt forgiven. So on Friday, handed President Joe Biden and his administration a strong rebuke. Conservative majority struck down Biden's controversial decision to cancel billions of dollars in student loan debt based only on his say-so and without Congress's clear approval. This leads the court to conclude the basic and consequential trade-offs inherent in mass debt cancellation programs are the one that Congress would most likely have intended for itself, wrote Chief Justice John Roberts. For the majority, the president overstepped his authority in unilaterally declaring millions of Americans could benefit from up to $20,000 in student loan forgiveness. Without going through Congress, the generous plan would have saddled taxpayers, the majority of whom have not gone to college themselves, with at least $400 billion in debt. This is a major question, obviously, because it costs so much and is a major policy. Yeah, this is just ridiculous.
You know, what I found funny is Biden's response the second he heard that they had rejected his plan, even though he knew. He even said, like, oh, maybe it might be tough to, survive a constitutional challenge. But he's like, oh, they're just wrong. I'm like, oh, forgive me. I didn't know you were a constitutional, expert, and you can just make a, unilateral decision like that and, throw them all under the bus. I'm like, my goodness. Like Biden can't even get upstairs, and he claims he knows more about the Constitution than, the Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. He'd rather talk about ice cream, because that's what he really does know.
Yeah. Like, he was never the brightest bulb in the cabinet, ever. Like, he was never known to be an intelligent senator. He was just a mediocre senator.
Yeah,
right?
well, the only thing of note that he did before becoming vice president was signing on to the crime bill in the 90s. Yeah. And that was actually a good thing for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But and then he's going against it, and he's going against everything he ever stood for, because the Democrats and the leftists want him to go a certain way, and the establishment wants to push the United States, and Canada for that matter, towards this kind of social justice garbage and this wokeism. And Biden is going along in lockstep. Well,
a lot of people say that Biden has never had principles. All that. I'm like, no. Biden is very simple to figure out. He's a sellout. He's a lifelong sellout. That's really all you need to know about Biden. What he will say and do whatever gets him votes, whatever gets him money, whatever. He's a politician for sale. That's always been his shtick, all the way back. He supported the crime bill and tough on crime policies way back when it was popular, and this is why he rejects it now. He supported the what do you call it? What was that policy, protecting that legislation that came out before the ruling about same-sex marriage, the one that tried to enshrine family, traditional marriage into law or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? It was a big thing.
Yeah.
He was fully behind that. He was 100% behind that because why? It was popular, and a lot of people Like he got popular of it. The second it turned and it suddenly became less popular, he was like, "Oh, I've always been in support of same-sex marriage." I'm like, you are a liar. He's a sellout. That's all you need to know about him. That's really He's really simple that way. Which is why it's not hard to believe that Biden would have accepted bribes from foreign governments. I'm like, well, knowing what you know about Biden, Mr. Sellout, of course he's going to be like, you think he's got any principle and he would actually say no to something even if he thinks it's sketchy? No, he's going to do it because he's a sellout. That's all you need to know.
Yep.
All right, man.
All right. So let's jump into we didn't have a ton of stories, so we'll talk about actually the second last story of the day.
Yep.
And that is talking about Pornhub in Virginia.
Pornhub in Virginia. Go figure.
Pornhub pulls out of Virginia to protest age verification law. So it's pulling out of the Commonwealth of Virginia. The widely popular smut purveyor shut down access to Amherst Dominion state residents to protest a new law requiring age verification. Porn fans looking to sample the website's offerings are now met with a video message courtesy of longtime porn queen Sherry DeVille. As you may know, your elected officials in Virginia are requiring us to verify your age before allowing you access to our website. While safety and compliance are the forefront of our mission, giving your ID card every time you want to visit an adult platform is the most effective solution in protecting our users, and in fact will put children and your privacy at risk. They argued the new law is full of loopholes and would not apply equally to all content providers, adding their current system to identify users by their device and allow access to age-restricted materials and websites based on that identification was superior. So... yeah, that's...
What do you think about that?
Well, so I'm just wondering, to identify users by their device and allow access to age-restricted materials and websites based on that identification. So that would mean that anybody using the same device would not have to provide identification. So that basically means that as far as I can tell, you had for Pornhub, you had to provide verification of your identification on your device.
Sure.
And then once you've done that, then your device is good to go ad infinitum.
Sure. Okay.
And well, like that's one thing. And then what Virginia's doing is that every time you access the site, then you have to provide identification.
Yeah, that's wrong. I don't see any. Okay, it's very like very transparent. They don't want to do this. Pornhub doesn't want to do this because they want children to watch porn.
Yeah,
because they
want to make it easier.
Market. The same thing as like why cigarettes advertise to kids, why alcohol historically alcohol companies went after kids because they want to get in the new market. Okay. Now, I don't think that there's like theoretically this shouldn't be controversial. Okay. If you go to like an adult store, a physical brick and mortar store, with like pornography videos, pornography, and all this kind of stuff, you're going to get ID'd when you go in there. You can't go in there if you're a minor. Okay. You get ID'd if you want to see that. If you want to go on the street and you're showing like magazines with pornography on them, you're probably going to get arrested for showing pornography in public. Why is it that you take that and you go online and suddenly it's okay? Like, this should not be controversial. We understand that there's a reason why people get ID'd when they go to a bar, because we want to make sure that the people who are at that bar are the legally appropriate age. They just seem to think that like going online is somehow different, which it isn't. It really isn't. Now, I agree that there's a problem with maybe using credit cards as a way of verification, because there's problems with giving your credit card online to who knows what they're going to do with it. But the fact that the idea that the infrastructure can be built, that shouldn't be a problem. We have the ability to create an infrastructure that works. Maybe they'll argue that, they'll be ineffective. Well, I'd rather have some form of protection than no protection whatsoever. When I talk to people about my bike, for example, I take my bike, and then whenever I stop somewhere, I lock it up with a very serious lock, with a very heavy-duty lock that's very difficult to break into. Is it impossible? No. Like if somebody really wanted to get at the bike, that any lock can be broken or picked or whatever if they really want to. But having a lock on something, even if it's an ineffective lock, is better than nothing because at the very least, a bike that is locked up, even with a basic lock, it's going to stop opportunists.
Mm-hmm.
People who are just actually walking by, see a bike that's not secured in any way, and they'll just grab it and run.
Yeah.
Whereas if you walk by and there's a bike and it has like the most cheap lock, but they don't happen to have any tools, they can't use their hands to break that lock, well, they're going to keep going. Like the fact that the internet is it's a wild west of like, you know, that is a problem. So I don't think you can really make that argument and status quo of internet completely available to anybody, anytime, anywhere, for any reason. That is not a good solution unless you're trying to argue that we want everyone, including kids, to watch porn, which let's face it, they want to do. Your point.
No, like, and I'm in favor of certainly a significant level of putting restrictions in place, putting barriers to make it more difficult, to make it harder to access this, especially for children. Because currently, of course, like, the fact that children can access a lot of this content, the fact that children can just come across it.
Even accidentally.
Well, even accidentally. And then, of course, if they find it accidentally, then they're children. They're going to be curious. Then it's easy to find the next time. And of course, if you're just saying that it's authorized once and done for every machine.
No, I don't think that works.
See,
that's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, for sure. Like, it's better than what we have here in Canada. It's better than what we have across most states.
Yeah.
But it's not enough to like, truly have a measure that prevents children from accessing pornography. Mm-hmm. And as much as I don't like having the state check out your ID, but then again...
You don't have a problem with that if you go to a bar, do you?
No. Well, it's also not the state particularly, but like if the website was the one managing it, and basically you had like your webcam and you scanned it like a QR code, then yeah, that would be an easy way to get around it, and it would be something that wouldn't require immense amounts of effort, but it would still put a lot more security.
Yeah. I think
Conqueror IDs are racist, didn't you know?
Always.
Yeah. I didn't even mention during our last story about the there was one Twitter user.
Okay.
And I'll find this, you mentioned something, and I'll talk about her, because what she said was just absolutely insane.
Well, okay. So the idea of, like, you know, age verification, people, the left usually brings up a whole plethora of arguments, and usually the arguments are not, they're not honest. They're not intellectually honest. Like they say, like, it'll never work. I'm like, well, whether it works or not, you should try to make the effort to try to protect kids. Whether or not, like, they don't make that argument when they do gun control. Suddenly, like, you know, like, whether it works or not, it doesn't matter. It's like, we have to do something. It's like, okay, well, maybe we should find an effective solution, but they don't deny that some solution needs to be done. But suddenly, when it comes to this is why you have to always be on alert, because what they're doing is they're not, they have their real reason why they don't want to put in these protections, and then they have their stated reason. This is like the whole Maud Bailey approach, right? Like there's a real reason, and then there's the pretend reason that's easier to defend. Oh, it'll never work. I'm like, okay, well, maybe we should find something, even if it's only slightly effective, it at least will, like, limit the amount of children that can casually
find this. Like, for example, there was a conversation about Twitter, and the question is, Twitter is one of those social media platforms that children can actually access. I think the minimum age is 14 for accessing Twitter. The problem, okay, here's the problem is Twitter also has porn on the site, and so here you run into a real problem. Okay, on the one hand, you're letting underage children, like which is 14, to basically be able to have Twitter access.
Yep.
Then you have the conflicting problem where porn is allowed on Twitter. So what you've done is you've basically created something that would be illegal, and you're just not doing anything about it. Now, I think one good proposal that I heard was, okay, if you have an account on Twitter and you are going to post porn on Twitter, you immediately have to be age verified.
Yep.
And I'm like, that is an actually good solution. Also, if you have an account on Twitter, if you're like a child and you can have an account normally, but if there's a porn image that shows up,
it has to require verification.
If you want to see it, now you have to verify your account. It has to be age verified.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you cannot see that porn image. And we have the AI to be able to identify porn images. So that should not be difficult. It really should not be difficult. We have the tools and the technology to do it. We just don't have the will. A good example is when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he was pissed at how much child pornography was proliferating on the site. And one of the first things he did, he made a concerted effort to purge Twitter as much as he was able to of child pornography.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of inability. It was a matter of will. The people before were just not willing to go in and to purge
They
child
were
pornography.
totally willing to look the other way.
Right. So if Pornhub really actually cared about, like, which they don't, I will say that they don't.
No, they don't.
They are happy as clams the fact that children are watching pornography, because they know that children who watch pornography will become adults who watch pornography, feeding their thing. That's just why the state. This is one of those few instances where the state has to intervene, because you know that it's not in their best interest to change these laws. This is why age of consent laws were actually instituted in the first place, because child pornography was rampant in countries like England and in America and France, all throughout the 1800s. The thing that stopped child prostitution, child exploitation, is basically age of consent, like minimum age of consent laws. That's what made it illegal, because suddenly you could be fined or imprisoned for having an underage prostitute, and suddenly that became less profitable. Hence, the practice slowly died or went underground, but at least it was not proliferating like crazy. That's why this is fine. Are you done, Stephen, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I'm just typing out the tweet to highlight the next subject. So,
okay,
go on for another minute.
Going. I could go forever. You know me, man. I am. Anyways, so I don't think that there's anything that's okay. The only thing is the will. Whether or not politicians believe that we can force this, and if public sentiment is strongly enough behind protecting children, which we're starting to see, then this really shouldn't be a difficult thing to do.
No.
Okay, is it hard? Are some solutions better than others? Sure, but can you really make a case for why we should not at least attempt to keep pornography from children
getting in the hands
online?
of children? Yeah.
With any actual argument for why we shouldn't do that? That does not include just laziness, because most of these arguments are just laziness.
Yeah.
It's too hard. It's too hard. It won't work.
Don't care.
It's a lot of effort. Yeah, whatever. No. You gotta do something.
Yeah.
And
you can't just let it happen.
Sure. You can make the argument like the gun control thing, but at the same time, this is something that everyone really should be behind, except the people who actually want
the people who want to promote it and groom it. Yep.
Those are the kind of people who will defend us. Yes.
Speaking about grooming children, let's go on to the final story of the day, which is from the CBC. Supporters of Drag Camp for Kids rally outside Vancouver Theatre. after reports of threats against staff, which
That
I
right there
don't
is
believe for a
framing.
second.
That's
Yep.
That's framing. That's
Framing.
exactly what they do. They frame. They change. This is Darbo. They deny, attack, reverse, victim, and oppressor. That's
Yep.
it. This is Darbo to a T.
Mhm.
They change it from they're not the bad guys. We're the bad guys for pointing it out and opposing it. And
Yeah.
and they always use the idea of like, oh, we're getting threats against staff. I'm like, give me a break.
Yeah.
You can go into a store and be like, hi, I'd like to file an official complaint. And suddenly they're like, oh my gosh, there's threats against us. Like, they're dishonest people, which is why you always have to take those things grain of salt. Sorry, go ahead, Steven.
Yes.
I want to make Jeff.
So, from CBC News, Carousel Theatre for Kids said it had to spend thousands for extra security. Supporters of a drag camp for kids gathered outside a theater in Vancouver's Granville Island Tuesday after event organizers said they were targeted by threats. So the Theater for Kids is hosting a summer camp that lets children use drag as a tool for artistic creation.
Yeah.
According to a statement from the local union, according to the union, the theater staff members have been bombarded with hateful messages and face threats of physical violence. Yeah, well, considering what I know what they call a threat, which is a quote-unquote threat, then it's totally bogus. Quote, and it called on members to gather outside the theater on Tuesday.
Yeah, imagine if Steven came up to me and you got a little dog. You're like, oh yeah, this is a great little dog. I'm going to cut off his tail, his like all of his toenails or whatever, because I don't want scratches on my floors and I don't like the tail wagging. I'm just going to cut off his tail. And I'm like, dude, that's terrible. You shouldn't do that. And be like, oh, I've been threatened. Oh my gosh, he hates such hateful behavior. What a bigot. No, this is how they act. Anyone disagreeing with them, anyone even saying anything that's not supportive, that's to them, that's violence, and that's threats. This is the problem. It's the boy who cried wolf. That's the left. This is why you have to take whenever they say this, you have to be like super grain of salt. Be like, I'll believe it when I see it because these people are pathological they are pathological liars. Whenever people say I've gotten 1 million death threats online, I'm like, okay, can you show me them? Well, no, I can't. Well, how can I believe what you're saying? Because that's what they do. Anyways, go on.
Yeah. All right. So continuing on. So it called on members to gather outside the theater on Tuesday, the first day of the 4-day camp, to present a united front against those who would do harm. According to the theater, the camp is open to kids in 2 age groups, 7 to 11 and 12 to 17.
Yep.
With an interest in expressing themselves through clothing, makeup, and performance, IATSE said a group called Action for Canada has come to the theater presenting bogus legal documents and petition with thousands of signatures. In an email, the CBC's Action for Canada shared a notice of liability. The group is not a legal document at this point, but aims to inform theater management of potential liability, just in case is both unlawful to sexually exploit children and is causing them harm, said the email. Legal experts have questioned the value of notices of liability, with one BC law professor telling CBC in 2021 that such documents appear to be nothing more than assertions of what someone believes the law to be.
By the way, I just want to make a really good quick observation. The CBC always claims, whenever it's questioned about their journalism, they always claim that they're unbiased and they don't have a side. This is editorialism disguised as news.
Yeah.
They're picking a side. It's obvious that they're actually arguing with the claim. Rather than reporting what the other group says, they are actively trying to debunk and disagree with them in real time. This is not journalism. This is editorialism disguised as news. Again, it's crazy to watch this in real life. Anyway, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So, continuing on, Action for Canada confirmed it delivered a petition to the theater on behalf of the person who started it. It had no knowledge of threats against the theater, nor does it condone threats or acts of violence. Vancouver police say they are aware of the protests, and the officers are monitoring the situation should anything criminal arise. Carousel Board President...
Right.
Yeah. Well, we've seen how they treat... Because this is, of course, Vancouver was where we had that famous assault of Billboard Chris.
Yep.
Where you had that cop said that, he instigated the incident simply by his presence.
That's right. Yeah, she was gleefully laughing and smiling, watching him get beat up and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is why I don't use This is why I don't say back to blue as a general statement. I'm
Mhm.
like, no, I support good cops, but I'll absolutely believe that there are a ton of bad cops out there, and so I can't support cops. Like, nope, depends on the cop. I will support the cops that are good cops.
Yes. That I'm
Go on.
with that 100%. Because we've seen, I was like back in 2020, I was like, yeah, like we can support the police. And then as 2020 went on, then I just looked at what was happening in the United States, what was happening in Canada, what was happening in Europe and abroad. And I was like, nope, I can't. I cannot say that I'm willing to 100% support cops in every situation, because there are so many situations, and we've seen even more lately of cops only taking action when certain groups are targeted.
Yep. And the same applies to teachers. The same applies to doctors, nurses, healthcare staff. The same applies to, like, all these kind of people. Remember they said, like, like the nurse, like, all the nurses and all that, they're heroes. I'm like, no. I would say that maybe there are some, and many that I'd say are heroes. Most of them are basically complacent sheep who basically did whatever they were told and never questioned, never wanted to, like, lose a paycheck. That's not courage, that's cowardice.
Yep.
It's like, just do whatever you're told and don't ask questions. There's no courage.
Don't stick your head up, because you don't want to have your head smacked down.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Frody Kiwi. Interesting name, I will say. How do you feel about drag shows for kids, Kiwi?
Yeah, by the way, I'm not monitoring the chat right now because
I know you're at the hotel, you see, you can't. So I'm monitoring and keeping track of the chat. There was a common chat that people have often, that some kind of trolls and silly people have brought forth about how they think that my flag is some sort of cannabis flag. I'm like, no.
I can see why they think that.
It is like, well, if you actually look at, it's very clear. It's very clear right here that this is a regular.
Yeah,
Canadian
the problem
flag.
is you can't. I know, but you can't see the whole flag, which is why it like you're obscuring like one half of the maple leaf, which is why I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see that. If there was the whole maple leaf, it'd be like, yeah, it's undeniable.
Yeah,
that it's maple leaf flag. But yeah, I can see why people make that jump to that conclusion. Yeah,
I don't have a big enough flag, I guess.
It's also that, like, let's face it, I actually did not know what an upside down flag meant until
2020.
Until we talked about it, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I know about that. So I'm not surprised that people don't understand what that is.
Yep.
They just think it's like, like, oh, like the picture in your wall is like, crooked. That's kind of what they think. It's like, oh, you forgot, you can't even put your flag like the right way.
Yeah. No.
That's what they think.
Give me 1 minute. My connection fails on mobile. Oh, okay. Sure. Well, we're going to be here for a little bit longer. So we're actually finishing the show fairly early today. So if people want to bring up any topics that they want to discuss on the show for the next kind of 10, 15 minutes, before 15 minutes. Or at least, if people want to talk for half an hour, then people could talk for half an hour. I didn't have too many stories just because there wasn't
normally,
like, aside from the groups of murders.
Yeah.
How are we managing and handling carbon tax 2.0? Well, of course, it's awful, and I hate carbon tax 2.0. I actually haven't had it affect me at the pumps yet.
Yeah, what's the price of the pumps right now?
Let's do a live check. So,
okay, I was in Kelowna.
Calgary gas. It was like I think last week it was 141.
Okay.
So let's check what it is right now currently. Where's Gas Buddy?
Yeah, it's still 141. I'm looking at Google Maps, 141, 143. So it hasn't, I don't think it's hit yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but in BC, the price of gas right now was 177.
Yeah. Huh.
So it's crazy over here.
Oh, that's over west.
I'm also kind of shocked when it comes to BC. I'm like, man, I forgot how expensive everything here is, because the gas is more expensive, but so you also have to pay PST on everything. And so, like, man, like everything was more expensive, like buying gas, buying food, buying like even like treats or whatever. Like, man, it's expensive to live here in BC. This sucks. What are you doing?
So Current Quorum wants to talk about the lawsuit. So I'll link it from the Western Standard. And we're, of course, going to use specialty phrases because this is still on BoobTube. So COVID jibby jab injured mom sues government, CBC, for $10.5 million over misinformation negligence. 47-year-old mother suffered a jibby jab injury is suing the federal government and CBC for following misinformation advice to get jib jabbed. Empowering Canadians and the Institute of Freedom and Justice are supporting and raising funds for a new lawsuit filed by plaintiff Carrie Sakamoto, mother of 3, who suffered significant physical and psychological harm, including permanent Bell's palsy, because she thought she was doing the right thing by following the advice and information from the government and the CBC about the jibby jabs. The lawsuit filed in the Court of King's Bench in Lethbridge against the Federal Minister of Health, the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Health Canada, the Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Celia Laurenco.
All the people guilty. All the people guilty.
A whole bunch of different people. It goes on to allege misfeasance in public office by health officials and various governmental agencies. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Quote, I think Canadians will be shocked to learn about the rush changes the government made to the safety standard for jibby jabs at the start of COVID, said Eva Chipiak of Chipiak Law, representing Ms. Sakamoto. At the same time, the defense were aggressively assuring the public that the COVID-19 jibby jabs were safe and effective. Those same agencies have worked to change their approval standards by removing the requirement for the vaccines, or the jibby jabs, to be either safe or effective. The government had already conceded to the Public Accounts Committee that the contracts with the manufacturers were rushed, did not contain the normal standards, and provided additional indemnities in favor of the manufacturers. Yeah, this is bad. Like we of course have been calling this out. We've been mentioning this for a long time.
Yeah.
But Pretty Kiwi may ask if this news is from your area. CBC is kind of federal. It's federal government propaganda news.
Okay,
but it is talking about a story from Lethbridge, which is about 3 hours from us.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't understand, BBC is
CBC.
The state network. No, but BBC, for example, is the UK. That's their government-funded kind of news agency and all that. CBC is that version of that. And they have been basically captured for the longest time. They are not. They're hyper partisan as they come. And by the way, one thing I don't know, Stephen. So one thing that happened while I was here is we got really terrible news. Somebody, a close friend of my mom, her son died suddenly.
Oh dang!
Very unexpectedly, and we're like, oh, okay, what happened? It took us a while to get the news because it was totally very sudden and unexpected. And then she told us the what happened, and okay, so this guy, he's a dad. He's got 2 young kids, very young, 34, very healthy. He was a soccer coach. He worked out. He basically was like an athlete. Had no medical anything. He basically was the picture of health and vitality and all that kind of stuff. Suddenly, one day he comes home and he says he's complaining of chest pain that's getting progressively worse. He ends up driving himself to the hospital, completely panic. He gets to the hospital, they check him in, and within within 10 minutes of getting to the hospital, he collapses, and then they were unable to revive him. And as soon as my mom told us the story, I was we're all looking at each other with a somber look, and we're like, we don't want to say anything, but we all know what this likely is, because that fits the profile of what the jibby jab injuries looks like. Person who's super healthy, young, totally has no anything that would tip you off to the idea that this person is in any way at risk of a heart attack, suddenly dying of a heart attack out of nowhere with no warning of anything, any kind. It's crazy that we're basically this is happening everywhere. And the thing is, we were threatened with all sorts of sanctions, deplatforming, and punishments of all kinds for misinformation, about like the jibby jabs and be like, if we even said something that would cause someone else not to get it, we were like, oh, you're causing harm. I'm like, well, shouldn't it also work the other way? If you're telling people they should definitely get this medical intervention that ends up, even if you didn't mean to, but it ends up causing harm to a person, that's an even greater reason to say that like actually that person should also be punished. It's we're like, this is why I think this is like very legitimate, because this is the kind of thing where a lot of people wouldn't have gotten this if places like the CBC and all these health authorities.
If these health authorities had not been pushing it so hard and saying, oh yes, like this is how like the entire push saying the only way we get back to normal is by taking the jibby jab. Like that's
a hostage situation.
It's a hostage situation. It's like, oh yes, you need to comply with our demands, otherwise you will not go and back to your regular life. And so that entire ideal of, oh, you want your life back, you have to do this action. That's basically like achieving a confession through torture.
It's like, well, we'll let all the hostages go. Give us $10 million and a helicopter. Otherwise, we'll kill them all. It's like, that sounds bad. Like, no, it's not bad. This is for their own good. If they want to live, you have to give us this. It's like, it's amazing to me how obvious of a crime this was, but everyone had to pretend like this was not some kind of like coercive. The idea that like coercing somebody to get something either through a bribe, which is what a lot of the government of Alberta bribed people. They had a lottery, try to get people to get the job. That's bribery. Or they tried to threaten them by losing their jobs. Like, and then Justin Trudeau has the freaking nerve to come out and say like, "Oh, we didn't compel anybody to get the vaccine." Like, you're such a freaking liar, man. Just stop. My goodness. So yeah, like good on this lady. I don't know if this will work. Like, I genuinely don't know. Don't have any confidence.
I have no confidence in the courts.
I don't. Unfortunately, we don't live in a fair system. So we'll see what happens. But I'm glad when I see lawsuits like this. I always hope that they succeed. I always hope that they can make some kind of a dent. But most of the lawsuits that have been successful during the COVID era have simply been the lawsuits to make a government stop doing something bad. Like, we need you to stop, the fines that they threaten, the jail time, or the sanctions that they threaten on certain groups, churches, or organizations. That's really the only effective lawsuits have been stop government from doing bad thing, not hold people accountable for bad things. Unless you can think of one that I haven't thought of. Like an actual lawsuit that successfully punished somebody for bad thing or something bad that they did during COVID.
Yeah,
I can't think of one in Canada.
No, I haven't heard of one in Canada. In the States, yes, but in Canada, no.
Yeah, even Trudeau, like the whole commission against the Freedom Convoy crackdown, which I think would be considered like both the emergency declaration, but also like the actual crackdown on innocent Canadians. All of that should fall there should be all sorts of criminal punishments for the government for what they did. Everything from slander, because like if you had a legitimately proper legal system, the prime minister could very easily be charged and convicted of slander for what he said to that one member of parliament when he basically accused her of standing with Nazis, even though she's Jewish. That could actually even be a hate crime. But he's immune because he's Justin Trudeau. He doesn't get that.
So I'm gonna address kind of the chat because of course, Danny, you can't see that. So in reference to something from Fruity Kiwi. So kind of general point of politics, I'm assuming you're kind of asking us where on the political spectrum that we are. So I've often referred to ourselves as kind of like socially conservative or fairly conservative libertarians. What's going on your end, Danny?
Sorry, my mom's closing the curtains because Well, Capitán entre el baño.
That's fine. You could address that. And then interesting commentary, of course, like your perspective on Germany and France and all of that. It's a very interesting perspective. I haven't spoken to someone from Germany in quite some time. The last time I spoke to someone from Europe. Hi, Mom. Yes, hello, Danny's mom. I've met her like twice.
Yeah.
He's traveling with her back to Calgary because they were visiting family on another part of the country. So
Yeah, we're basically in another province right now. So
yeah,
and like I can't use the motel
Wi-Fi because it's too spotty.
Too spotty.
Yeah.
So I basically have to use my
But
phone.
you will be back home Thursday?
Tomorrow.
Okay, so for the Thursday show, Danny will be back and
Normal.
things will be normal and he'll have his regular microphone and we won't have any sort of issues that way.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'd be interested actually, Fruity Kiwi, because you are from Germany, what your perspective is or what you know about like Canadian and American politics. Because of course we're both Canadians. We aren't big fans of Canada anymore. We were once very proud patriotic Canadians, but we saw what happened in the past few years. And I actually made kind of a fairly interesting post in the past couple of days, and that angered quite a few people. The post says, I was once willing to give my life for what I believe this country stood for. Today I'd give my life to protect my family from what this country has become.
Oh, good point.
And so that angered a lot of people.
Yeah.
So like, well, then just leave. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to get Alberta to come with me because Alberta's the best part of Canada.
That's a terrible argument. When people say just leave.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get that sometimes we say that, but like the problem with that argument is it doesn't actually resolve.
It doesn't make things better.
It doesn't address the issue.
And all it does is if you have everybody of a certain viewpoint leaving, like we look at what's happening in California, Florida, across the United States. Florida is becoming more conservative. California is becoming more blue. You see the failure of California.
Yeah.
And because all the conservatives, all the centrists are all leaving, California will never have, or very likely until there's some sort of serious collapse, California will never have a conservative government. Ever.
Which means that you never get a change, any accountability of any kind.
It'll all be yes. And then of course Conquerworm coming in with the valid conservative Christian viewpoint. Jesus is coming back soon.
Oh,
at least he's not saying Apophis anymore, so I'll give you credit for that.
All right,
the world is going to keep getting worse, and false hero will come a solution to save the world. He is a lie. Repentance and turning to Christ is our only hope. Yes, that is 100% true. And okay, and then he made an Apophis claim. Thank you, Jeremy. The asteroid was coming to kill us all after Jesus has saved us all.
He is consistent.
He is consistent in his world destruction.
That's right. That's good.
This is all right. Let's read this from a German. Honestly, about Canada, I know is Trudeau. To be honest, Canada is kind of uninteresting for us Germans. Well, that's true. The U.S. is just more important, but in Germany, it's only Biden versus Trump. Now, media's report about the Florida guy. I do not remember the name. DeSantis. Yes, DeSantis is the main competition for Trump in the Republican primary. They were pretty much
falling.
He's definitely
he's
falling
in like a lot of polls, and a lot of people are thinking like he's made too many blunders.
Well, some of it is blunders. Most of the reason that he's fallen in the polls is simply because Trump got indicted. And that was the big reason that Trump had his massive jump in the polls, was that he got indicted. And DeSantis hasn't been able to recover. DeSantis definitely has some issues. Well, like it's interesting.
Hasn't been able to capitalize.
He hasn't been able to capitalize, and he hasn't been able to recover. It should be interesting how the indictments go. That, of course, is coming up in August with the grand jury trial. So, like, I know that there was a big thing that it was like, oh no, the the recording of Trump saying that the documents were classified wasn't concerning the ones that he were indicted on. And Tim Pool was like, this totally vindicates Trump. And I'm like, well, yes and no. It vindicates him on this one indictment charge, but then all they have to do is charge him on another indictment about this new case. And then they already have the smoking gun for it. So, but in accordance with your points of most Germans think it's weird that the United States only has 2 parties, Canada has a whole bunch of parties. And then from my perspective, I really like Trudeau. We despise Trudeau. Trudeau is horrifying.
The reason people in other parts of the world like Trudeau is because they don't know him.
Yes. They've been given the rest of the world has been given kind of a false impression of what Trudeau is. They get this impression that he's this kind of very like kind and generous, and he's always very like well poised, and he always has this perfectly coiffed hair. But yes, as Conquerworm says, JT is destroying Canada. Justin Trudeau is basically said that anyone that opposes him should be like removed.
Justin Trudeau is basically Gaston from the movie Beauty and the Beast.
Yes.
He is the pretty boy that seems like he's great at the beginning.
Him and his real self, he is not only like evil, but he is like scary evil. Like that is the kind of person that he is. Canadians, he is so hated in Canada that he literally, and I don't mean this like just like hyperbolically, he cannot go anywhere in Canada.
Oh, I lost your audio for a second.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
He can't go anywhere. Everywhere he goes in the country, he has to go with like massive groups of security because everyone in Canada hates him. So yeah, I if you like him, it's likely because you don't know him. That's the best way I could put it. Hey, Stephen.
Oh, your Conquerworm. You're talking about the video of that one woman. I think she was from the Netherlands, I believe. She was like a member of the European Parliament, and she basically. I'll see if I can find it. What? Sorry.
Are you talking about Christine Anderson?
Yes.
That's.
I'll find the video of Christine Anderson.
Yeah.
EU Parliament. Where's EU Trudeau? There it is.
Gonna be a commentary.
Okay. So I will full screen it. There we go. So this is last year.
We cannot let Ukraine down.
Kanada, nekada simbol modernog svijeta, je pod vodstvom vaše kvazi-liberalne čizme proteklih mjeseci postala simbol kršenja temeljnih ljudskih prava i građanskih sloboda. Za vas su to možda liberalne metode. Međutim, za mnoge građane svijeta to je diktatura najgore vrste.
And then where is it? Christine Anderson. There it is.
Basic dictatorship who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy should not be allowed to speak in this house at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Oh, I love that video so much. I lost your audio again. So hopefully, who is she? Christine Anderson is an MP from Belgium, I believe. And yeah, Danny, I do not have your audio for some reason.
Okay.
Oh, I have you now. You're just quiet. So, but what they're saying is that during the Freedom Convoy of 2022, Justin Trudeau instructed Parliament, he instructed the government to seize and freeze the bank accounts of those who are. I'll get to the opinion on the Russian-Ukraine war in just a minute. Seize and freeze the bank accounts of those who were involved in a protest against him. He instructed the police to be very, very harsh with anyone who peacefully resisted the instruction to to leave. And he there's this one famous scene in which the RCMP and the Toronto police basically ran over this old woman because she refused to move from a public space. So the list of all the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, it's the federal police force. It's similar to the FBI in the United States. So they have very, very complete force, and they answer to the Prime Minister. So the RCMP should be investigating a lot of the things that Trudeau has done. In terms of corruption, I could go on and on and on. Like, we could talk about all the terrible things that Trudeau has done to Canadians for a very long time. But you did ask a very specific question about the Russian-Ukraine war. Russia-Ukraine war, Russia was wrong to invade Ukraine. Yes. I'm on board with that. Like, they should not have done it. Putin, of course, wants to kind of bring back the glory of the Soviet Empire that he had, which he saw as the glory days of Russia. That being said, I think that in terms of comparing and contrasting Putin and Zelensky, they're both absolute scum. Zelensky has openly stated that he wants NATO to send nukes to Moscow preemptively before any declaration of war because he wants to harm Russia. He did. I can actually cite you the post for it, that Zelensky actively stated that he wanted NATO to bomb Russia. I'm really having issue with your quality.
So like,
yeah,
on off. It just,
yeah, I know it's
glitching. So I think I'm gonna cut. I'm gonna like leave here because I don't have a reliable microphone right now.
Oh wait, I linked it to the wrong one. Give me 1 second. I will put it onto the screen. There we go. So, Zelensky's staff forced to clarify statement after president suggests preemptive strike on Russia. So, Volodymyr Zelensky in his speech on this is from October 6, 2022, said NATO's role was to make it impossible for Russia to use nuclear weapons. He appealed to the international community before February 24th to do preemptive strikes so they will know what happened to them if they use it and not vice versa, to wait for nuclear strikes by Russia. That is actively calling for NATO to bomb Russia. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Zelensky is not a good dude. He's also banned. He's also, not banned. He's arrested the leader of the opposition party in Ukraine. And he's basically just done a whole bunch of things which in any other circumstance he would be called a dictator. But because his enemy is Putin, which according to kind of the modern mainstream political establishment left, he is kind of the modern Hitler, then he is seen as the savior of the Western world, but he's not. Russia and Ukraine are both corrupt up to their eyeballs. And there's nothing that I can say to defend either of them. I just have no way of referring to this. Sorry, what would I do if I was the leader? If I was the leader of Ukraine, I would say that I would end the war right now. I would say, okay, there's a certain segment of Ukraine, which is like part of Crimea, which is part of the eastern provinces, which is more loyal to Russia. I would say there is a new line. This is the new line of Russia. This is the new line of Ukraine. And that part will be a part of Russia. This will be a part of Ukraine. And now that we've drawn this new line, then Ukraine will join NATO. Or at least that NATO will offer protections to Ukraine. Ukraine cannot win this war. It is an absolute impossibility to have Ukraine win this war without involving NATO. And any sort of continuation, any try and push, oh, we can win this. No, you can't. Comparing Ukrainian forces and Russian forces, Russians outnumber them 20-1, and they have far more availability in terms of power and resources. So yes, I like Ukrainian people. But Ukraine as a country has, for the past 30 years, Ukraine has topped almost every list of the most corrupt nations on the planet, or at least been in the top 10. Would you say the same about California? That said they want to join Spain. Like back when California was still belonging to Mexico? Like, I'm not sure what you're saying about California and Spain. Because California and Spain are not just now. I have not heard anything about California wanting to join Spain. This is new. I'm searching up news. I'm not seeing anything in any form of news about kind of California joining Spain. So would you say the same about California? Oh, if they wanted to join, this is kind of like a hypothetical, if they wanted to join Spain. If California wanted to join Spain, let them go. Just like for here in Alberta, if we want to join the United States, let us go. Let my states go. If there is a solid election, if there's a solid like referendum that shows that there is a majority support for doing so, like having these massive countries with huge variances in opinion, like it's a good idea in theory, but when you have these immense gaps in ideological constructs between kind of the left and the right, then the ideological divide at some point becomes too severe and you just can't support it anymore. So like I've actually supported in the past. I've supported kind of a splitting where you have like Canada taking California, kind of the western coast, the Washington, Oregon, California, United States taking Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and then the eastern provinces taking kind of New York, and to split it up into like the New Canada and what they colloquially call Jesus Land. Because that would more reasonably align with ideological guidelines. Now, of course, you're not going to have 100% adherence to that, but it is far more similar than what you have in Quebec and Alberta or California and Florida. So the systems that we have in place right now are not perfect. Right now, of course, we're trying to operate within them. But We just kind of call the problems out as we see them. Guide lances or guidelines? I'm not sure what did I say guide lances? Guidelines. So like, operating within the guidelines that we have. So that would mean like operating within the nations that we have currently, but pushing for more ideological alignment. Maybe we don't need ideological division. We can just keep following the laws. There is, like, when the laws are set up to disadvantage certain groups, I'm not saying break the laws. I'm just saying that move elsewhere. Or, like, have a push so that there is ideological groups that move elsewhere. Like, we say that we don't want to move. We don't want to leave Canada. We don't want, as individuals, to leave Canada. We want Alberta to leave Canada because Alberta is going to continue to suffer within a united Canada. So yes, continue following the laws of Canada, but then, yes, use the democratic process, moving as a part of it. Yes. So using referendums, use voting, and then having a cultural shift via moving outside of that nation. So this has been a great conversation. Unfortunately, it is fairly late here. I understand, of course, for Fruity Kiwi, it's pretty early. So we thank everybody for joining in the live stream because we've been going for about 2 hours. We will, of course, be live streaming on Thursday. I'll be trying live streaming onto Twitch and Kick, which is kind of the new live streaming kind of beta project. So we'll try and work that out. So if you want to kind of bring conversation, bring new questions, then we're totally on board with that. Danny, of course, will be a part of that and won't have connection issues because he won't be trying to join from a motel. So that's where we're going to end for this evening. And I hope that everybody had a wonderful time. And we will see you all then. And if you want to check out our other video content or other material, you can check us out at YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. YouTube, we only put on kind of the non-edgy stuff. So, but BitChute and Rumble is where we post all our content. And of course, you can find everything about us at theshrewddudes.com. So, until then, we'll be streaming live on Thursday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time here in Calgary. And until then, we always like to remind you, why be rude when you can be shrewd? Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you Thursday. And as always, God bless.